Laura and I first crossed paths during our sophomore year in college, and there was an immediate spark between us. She was absolutely stunning with her rich brown hair, striking blue eyes, and an impressive physique. But it was her lively personality that really drew me in. She was sharp, upbeat, and had a great sense of humor. We quickly became best friends, and after just 3 months, we shared an unforgettable moment in my car behind the baseball stadium. It was awkward yet incredibly special, and when we finally came together, she was moved to tears of joy. From that moment, I was certain we were meant to be. I am Michael, a contractor hailing from a small Midwestern town. I'm 6 feet tall, weigh 187 pounds, and have brown eyes with sandy hair. I run a successful remodeling business, while Laura teaches music at a nearby high school. Together, we're comfortably settled and planning to start a family soon. Our first decade of marriage was a dream come true. Our intimate moments were fulfilling, though not as frequent as we'd like. We had a nightly ritual of cuddling, and waking up next to Laura was always a delight. I would do anything for her, without a second thought. But then, something happened that shook me to my core. Most of our work is seasonal, so we take vacations during holidays and summer. Laura sometimes visited family or kept up with teaching during my busy periods. Our go-to winter getaway was always somewhere warm. During a rough patch in our marriage, we decided on a 2-week all-inclusive spa resort in the Bahamas, hoping to rekindle our connection. However, my idealized view of our marriage quickly began to crumble. Before we even boarded the plane, a man's lingering glances at Laura at the airport set off alarm bells. His familiarity with her was unsettling, though he didn't pursue any further contact. Laura seemed oblivious to my discomfort. On the plane, the same man ended up sitting several rows ahead of us. Laura's choice of an aisle seat over her usual window seat only heightened my suspicions. When I asked her about it, she attributed it to a stomach issue. I managed to switch seats for her with another passenger, citing her discomfort, but my anxiety was palpable. Normally I sleep well on flights, but my anxiety kept me awake on the journey from Minneapolis to Miami. Despite pretending to be asleep, I couldn't shake my unease. Laura and I stowed our belongings, and once we were airborne, I pretended to sleep while keeping a close watch on her. After about 15 minutes, she glanced at me, probably thinking I was asleep. Believing I was unaware, she got up and headed to the restroom. I observed her interaction with a man she briefly touched on the shoulder, confirming my suspicions. When they crossed paths in the aisle, their body language spoke volumes, his hand on her waist, her smile. It was evident they were close. Realizing the threat to our marriage, I was overwhelmed with sadness. How could she betray us like this? Throughout the flight, I wrestled with the situation, hoping for some sort of resolution. But my fears were confirmed as we boarded the flight to Nassau, and I saw him sitting 5 rows behind us, engrossed in his book. During the flight, Laura resumed her usual window seat, which felt like a return to normalcy. Upon arriving in Nassau, we picked up our bags, rented a car, and drove to the hotel. While I was behind the wheel, Laura was absorbed in her phone, leaving me to wrestle with my emotions. "Who are you texting?" I asked. "Just my mom and sister, letting them know we made it," she replied. I'd rather see it myself." Isn't it funny how suspicions snowball? Our room was breathtaking, with a view of the ocean and a pool. As we unpacked, I knew I needed to do something to win Laura back. I approached her, wrapped her in a hug, and kissed her neck. "You know how much I love you?" I said. Laura turned to me, gave me a soft kiss on the lips, and responded, "I love you too, baby." But her eyes seemed distant. "I'd never hurt you, Laura, or our marriage," I reassured her. She shuddered and whispered, "I know, Michael," avoiding my gaze. I felt like I was losing this battle. If she hadn't cheated yet, she was on the verge of doing so. I released her and hurried to the bathroom, trying to gather my thoughts. How did we end up here? What did I miss? Is it too late to fix this? I splashed some water on my face and came back to find Laura with an unusual expression. "Michael, I got my period and forgot tampons," she said. "What? It just started, but this isn't normal." "Maybe it's just the excitement of the trip. I'll go get some," she said, leaving and closing the door behind her. At first I thought this might slow her affair, but then doubt crept in. This was a new development. Was she using it as an excuse to avoid intimacy? It seemed that way, and it broke my heart. If that's true, she's not the woman I thought I married. No one could be so cruel and deceitful, letting me plan and pay for this trip just to betray me. I felt lost and like I was losing my mind. Who was this woman I had loved for over 10 years? I noticed her phone by the TV and turned it on, finding no password change. I checked her messages with Brian Adams, starting from when we were in the car. Brian: "Hey, hot, can't wait to have you." Laura: "You almost got us caught." Brian: "I almost kissed you on the plane." Laura: "Michael was asleep. I liked your squeeze." Brian: "I'm in the lobby. Is Michael acting weird?" Their conversation continued in the hotel room. Brian: "When will you leave Michael?" Laura: "Michael's a good husband." Brian: "But I'm better in bed." Laura: "Michael's good, but I need more. Let's make a baby." Brian: "I'll make you wet." Laura: "Michael won't touch me. I'll lie about my period." Brian: "He's so clueless." Laura: "Don't call him that." Brian: "Meet me in the lobby." Laura: "Give me 5. I stood there, stunned, contemplating whether to use these texts as grounds for a divorce. In the end, I decided against it. My phone was filled with all my personal information. Since she caused this mess, I figured she should handle it. I kept both phones knowing she'd notice hers missing soon, but I planned to be long gone by then. The rising bile in my throat made me vomit. I looked out at the beautiful Caribbean Sea, which had brought me so much joy just 8 hours ago. My plans for a romantic 2 weeks had crumbled, leaving me alone, shocked and furious. I wanted revenge on both of them. Divorce was inevitable, but I needed more. As I peered out the window, I saw them kissing by the pool. I grabbed my camera and started recording, intending to use this evidence later. They must have had a plan to keep me busy while they were together. It struck me. They were planning to spend 2 weeks together, so why not get ahead of them? I needed to find out how they intended to keep me occupied. I kept filming until they kissed again, and Laura walked away. Returning to the bathroom, I turned on the shower to calm myself. If she asked, I'd say it was to help me relax after the flight and get rid of the airplane smell. 5 minutes later, I heard the door open and close. "I'm back," she called out. "I brought water and tampons." "Great, I'll be out soon." I wondered why she'd bring water when the resort provides it. Then it hit me. She might be planning to medicate me. I weighed my options. If I refused the drink, she'd get suspicious. If I drank it and she had poisoned it, she and her lover could leave. What should I do? She knocked, concerned about how long I was taking. Was it about me or her date? Anger flared, but I controlled it. She handed me an already opened bottle. "Stay hydrated," she said, avoiding my gaze. I pretended to drink, but discreetly emptied and refilled the bottle in the bathroom. Back in the room, she began unpacking, oblivious to my trick. I noticed a hot dress and asked about it. She smiled and said she brought it. "Aren't you tired?" I hinted at her deceit. Feigning exhaustion and a racing heart, I said, "Yeah, I'm a bit tired. What time is dinner?" "Seating is in a couple of hours. Rest and I'll wake you," she replied sincerely. "Okay, I won't sleep long. I want time with you," I said, trying to mask her reaction. "Love you," she responded, though less convincingly. I pretended to fall asleep while she called someone, pleased to have tricked her. "I'll be at the Sandpiper Bar in an hour," she said, giggling. "Can't wait, love. Bye." She hung up and prepared for her night out. As I faked sleep, my anger simmered, and I watched her. After her shower, I searched her purse and found unlabeled pills. I pocketed some, then returned to bed and waited for her to leave. Once she was gone, I dressed quickly, ready to put my plan into action. My first task was to gather more concrete video evidence of their affair. Next, I aimed to disrupt their plans for the remainder of the trip. Although I hadn't fully mapped out my strategy, I was determined to make sure both of them faced consequences for their deceit. Finally, I decided it was time to cut the trip short and start divorce proceedings as soon as possible. I couldn't afford to wait and let Laura sabotage our finances or make other moves against me. After hastily dressing, I grabbed my camera and left the room. As I headed to the bar, I hoped the camera would perform well in the dim lighting. Arriving at the bar, I positioned myself behind some palm trees, ensuring a clear view of the bar while staying hidden. Watching from a distance, my heart burned with a mix of rage and betrayal as I saw Laura, wearing that provocative red dress I once admired, entwined with another man. It took every bit of self-control not to storm over and confront him. But I reminded myself that my goal was to gather evidence, not to create a scene that might get me in trouble. With steady hands, I captured every interaction, every kiss and caress, and every shared laugh, all while feeling a deep sense of anguish at seeing my wife so intimately involved with someone else. As the hours dragged on, my resolve began to waver, and I considered returning to our now empty room. Just as I was about to leave, I saw them leaving the dance floor with a sense of urgency. Curiosity piqued, I followed them discreetly, keeping a safe distance to avoid detection. They paused occasionally for affectionate moments, and I diligently recorded their every move. Eventually, they arrived at his modest room, a stark contrast to the luxury we had once enjoyed together. Peering through the partially drawn curtains, I strained to catch snippets of their conversation, my camera capturing every word exchanged. Despite the pain gnawing at my heart, I remained resolute, knowing the evidence I was gathering would be crucial in the days ahead. As they undressed, I couldn't help but notice his impressive size, though it offered no excuse for her betrayal or for him fathering a child. I lingered outside, recording their passionate encounter, which seemed never-ending. Not only was he well endowed, but he also displayed remarkable stamina. As midnight drew near, I anticipated her departure, only to overhear a troubling conversation between them. She was fretting about the pills she'd given me, worried if they were safe. He reassured her that I'd be out for hours without any harm, and suggested a plan to keep me out of their way longer. Their callous laughter ignited my fury. I had seen and heard enough, so I retreated to my room, burning with the desire for revenge. My plan was to disrupt their nightly escapades, so I devised a scheme. I'd create a diversion to draw her away, giving me a chance to confront him directly. But how could I separate them? I decided that a spa day would be the perfect distraction. I'd present Laura with a spa package, masking my true intentions with feigned affection. It was a deceitful move, but one I deemed necessary to get the justice they deserved. If she hesitated, I'd insist that the spa package was non-refundable, playing on her guilt to make sure she accepted it, just as she had done to me in the past. With her occupied for hours, I would have time to address the betrayal. After changing into shorts, I lay awake, plotting my revenge and focused on confronting him. Around 5 in the morning, Laura quietly returned and slipped into bed beside me. I fought the urge to push her away and pretended to be asleep, waiting for the right moment to act. By 7, as she slept soundly, I got up, took a quick shower, and headed out to find the spa. I hoped to get an early start and find a package that would keep her busy while I handled the situation. At the spa, I quickly chose a 3-hour session, prioritizing its length over what it included. I booked the earliest slot, planning to surprise Laura. Satisfied, I left to explore, knowing she likely needed rest after her night with her lover. When I returned to the room around 9 a.m., Laura was still asleep. Quietly, I rummaged through her purse and found her phone. I scrolled through her messages and came across one from Brian sent within the last hour. "You were amazing last night. Any chance you could ditch Michael for some afternoon fun?" My anger flared, but I managed to keep it in check, knowing the end was approaching. As Laura began to wake, I put her phone back and gently kissed her forehead. "Good morning, sleepyhead," I said softly. "I'm sorry about last night for falling asleep so suddenly and ruining our dinner plans. I have a surprise for you." Laura's eyes showed a flicker of uncertainty as she smiled and yawned. "What kind of surprise, she asked. "I booked you a spa day to apologize for last night and to show you how much I love you," I said. Even in my drowsy state, I noticed her slight shiver. It occurred to me that she might have doubts about our relationship. "Everything okay?" I asked gently. "Or don't you like my gift?" Laura responded with a hesitant nod and a faint smile. "Oh no, I like it," she reassured me, though her smile wavered. "I just wish you had asked me first." I countered, "If I had done that, it wouldn't have been a surprise, would it?" I hoped to calm any lingering doubts. "Look, this doesn't mean you need to rush to the spa right away. I've made a reservation for 02 today so we can spend some time together." Laura agreed, thanking me for my thoughtfulness. After she got up and went to the bathroom, I looked out the window and saw Brian by the pool, chatting with 2 young women. Despite my suspicion that Laura had informed him about my surprise, he seemed unbothered. Watching them, it struck me that Brian might have backup plans if Laura couldn't join him for some afternoon fun. About an hour later, Laura and I were at the buffet, filling our plates. I piled mine with breakfast items while Laura chose just fruit and coffee. Feeling hungry, babe? Is it because of your period? I asked. Yeah, that might be it. I really don't have much of an appetite, she replied, clearly distracted. Her reaction to Brian's message made me more curious, but my plan seemed to be working, especially on her. After breakfast, we took a walk along the beach. I brought my camera to capture shots of the palm trees and Laura. Despite my compliments, she appeared uneasy, hinting at a growing sense of guilt. "What's wrong, babe? Are you okay?" I asked, sensing her discomfort. "No, I'm fine, just a bit tired," she responded, her guilt becoming more apparent. "Would you mind if I went back to our room for a nap before my spa visit?" she asked. "Sure, no problem. I understand it's not ideal to have your period start during vacation," I reassured her, hiding my growing frustration. As she walked away without a goodbye kiss, I resolved to confront Brian soon. While I continued my walk along the beach, lost in thought, I came across two couples, including the women who had spoken to Brian earlier. They were now accompanied by two burly men who looked formidable. Overhearing their conversation, it was clear that Brian had convinced them to go deep-sea fishing, leaving the women feeling neglected. Despite their attempts to comfort them, the women felt unappreciated and left out. As the two women passed by, it was clear that Brian had emerged victorious in their argument, leaving them unsatisfied. After a brief stroll along the beach, I decided to head back and check on how Brian was faring. I was concerned that Laura might have skipped her spa appointment to be with him. If that was the case, I might be able to capture more footage of their rendezvous. I wandered around the hotel grounds for over an hour until I found myself outside Brian's room. I could hear voices inside, but Loris was not among them. Carefully, I set up my camera, positioning it on a windowsill to capture the scene within. It was a risky move since it was daytime, but I hoped the camera's vantage point would go unnoticed. With the camera rolling, I took up a position where I could keep an eye on the door, waiting to see who would emerge. Time seemed to crawl, but my patience was eventually rewarded. The two women I had seen with Brian earlier at the pool and then at the beach with those burly men came out of his room. They looked pleased, exchanging smiles and giggles as if they were sharing a tantalizing secret. It was both amusing and infuriating. Once they left, I retrieved my camera and made my way back to my room. Laura wouldn't be back from her spa session for another hour, so I used the time to review my footage. I fired up my laptop and transferred all the videos I had taken since our arrival. Most of it was footage of Laura and Brian, but the highlights were the videos of the two women in Brian's room. It was like watching a low-budget adult film. Brian had convinced the women to join him in a ménage à trois. One woman had sex with him while the other watched and played solo. Then they switched roles. An idea struck me. I could time my departure to coincide with Laura's return. She would likely try to medicate me again to make me look foolish, and if I played my cards right, she would end up at the bar with Brian, where they would drink and dance. My plan was to slip a pill into their drinks towards the end of the night so that by the time they reached his room, they would be out cold. Timing would be crucial, but in reality, plans rarely go off without a hitch. The next step involved making a DVR copy of Brian's escapades. I had to admire his ability to charm two attractive women into his room. With several DVR discs on hand, I duplicated his exploits from the day. Now, I needed to figure out where to discreetly leave these copies. I also made a backup of all my previous recordings on another DVR, just in case. Heading to the front desk, I arranged for one disc to be sent to my brother Tom's house, with a note instructing him not to play it or reveal its origin. This was a precaution in case my plan fell through, or if Laura and Brian discovered my scheme and sought retaliation. At least my brother would have evidence if they tried anything. Checking the time, I noticed Laura would be finishing her spa treatment soon. I decided to quickly scout the hotel to locate the rooms of the two women and their boyfriends. Surely their partners would be curious about their whereabouts while they were out deep-sea fishing. I soon saw the women emerging from the pool with towels and followed them to their rooms, which were conveniently adjacent to each other. This was one piece of the puzzle solved. Returning to my room, I called the airline to book the earliest available flight. The earliest I could get was at 10 a.m., later than I had hoped, but I booked it nonetheless. I also informed the front desk that Laura and I had to leave the following morning due to a sudden emergency and would be checking out at 8 a.m. They expressed their sympathy and wished us well. Back in my room, I was fully committed to my plan. No matter what obstacles arose, I would catch a flight in the morning and beat Laura home. Even if things didn't go as planned, I could still ruin her trip. But if my scheme worked, she would be stranded here for days, maybe weeks, giving me ample time to cause chaos in her life. The plan was straightforward. First, I would let Laura believe she had successfully medicated me, pretending to be asleep so she and Brian could enjoy their evening. Second, I would return to the bar, keeping an eye on their drinks and slipping a pill into them towards the end of the night. If timed correctly, they would pass out just before or immediately upon reaching his room. Third, once they were inside, I would intervene. I'd escort Laura back to our room, then return to Brian's to strip him of his belongings: wallet, cash, passport, credit cards, clothes, everything he brought. Finally, I would find the rooms of the two women Brian had been with and discreetly slide the DVR drives under their doors, hoping one of their boyfriends would discover the footage and see Brian for who he truly was. I knew the two women's boyfriends would be furious when they found out about their partner's indiscretions. Brian's license plate was prominently visible in the video, so tracking him down would be a breeze. My plan also involved treating Laura the same way I had planned for Brian, removing all her belongings except her clothes and purse. I'd leave a note in her empty wallet to shift the blame. With everything in place, I just had to wait for the night's events. Laura came back to the room at 5:30 p.m., looking more relaxed and radiant than ever. It stung to think about how she had ended our marriage, knowing I would never again have her beauty by my side. "Michael, thank you so much for the spa day. It was incredible. I feel like a new person," she said, her face glowing with satisfaction. "I'm so glad you enjoyed it. You didn't seem too thrilled about the idea at first, but I'm glad you came around. I just wanted to show you how much you mean to me," I replied, noticing the tears welling up in her eyes. "Thanks again. I really loved it, and I love you," she said with more conviction and emotion. "Anytime, baby. We've got dinner reservations for 7. Why don't we relax for a bit and then get ready?" I suggested. She nodded and headed to the bathroom with her purse. A few minutes later, she came out with 2 bottles of water, handing one to me. "Here, drink up. I want to go dancing tonight, so you'd better stay hydrated," she said with a playful wink. All right. Let me use the bathroom first," I chuckled. Once inside, I went through my usual routine, emptied the bottle, and refilled it with water from the sink. I flushed the toilet to simulate activity before returning to the bedroom. I continued sipping water, and after about 15 minutes, started to fake sleep, snoring lightly while watching Laura prepare for her night out with Brian. Unbeknownst to her, she went into the bathroom and started the shower. Seizing the moment, I grabbed her phone to check her messages from Brian. "I can't get away this afternoon. Michael got me a spa package I couldn't refuse," she had texted. "No worries, babe. Got other plans. Are we still on for tonight?" Brian had replied. "Definitely. I can't wait to be with you," Laura had responded, stoking my anger. Seeing their exchange, my anger simmered but didn't dissipate. The end was in sight. All I had to do now was follow them to the bar, observe their dancing, and then carry out my plan to spike their drinks. I rifled through Laura's purse and found Brian's room keycard, pocketing it before neatly putting everything back. Laura took longer than expected to get ready. When she finally sat beside me on the bed and gently stroked my cheek, I was taken aback. "After this week, I'll be all yours. I promise. I just needed some space before we start a family. I'm sorry I couldn't confide in you, but I had to do this. The next few days are for me. I couldn't risk telling you and having you leave me, but I need you more than ever. I love you deeply, but I have to do this," she said, her voice full of emotion. She leaned in, kissed my cheek, and whispered, "I love you so much, Michael." At first, I thought she might have realized I was awake, but soon I realized she was just trying to ease her guilt. It was too late for that. Soon she was fully dressed and left the room. As soon as the door closed behind her, I jumped out of bed, got dressed, and followed her. They ended up back at the same bar as the previous night, which was even busier. I spotted the two women and their boyfriends from the beach, and I hoped my plan would work. I settled into my usual spot and started recording the evening's events with my camera. Laura and Brian took a table, chatting and laughing as the night went on. When it started to get late, I knew it was time to execute my plan. I made my way to the bar, making sure not to draw any attention. Finding a seat near where the waitresses prepared drinks, I ordered a beer and kept a close eye on them. I watched as a waitress took their order and passed it to the bartender. Seizing the opportunity, I ordered the same drinks from a different bartender. As the first bartender turned away, I discreetly opened a capsule and poured its contents into each drink, stirring to mix the powder. It fizzed slightly but blended in perfectly. With the drinks prepared, I maneuvered past the waitress and made sure to shield the transaction from view. The bar's crowd helped cover my actions, and my plan went unnoticed. I stepped back, allowing the waitress to deliver the drinks to Laura and Brian. I returned to my observation spot, my heart racing as I waited to see if my timing was right. It was just past 1 a.m., and if the medication worked as planned, they should be out cold by around 11 a.m. the following morning. It was crucial that they made it to Brian's room before passing out. They sipped their drinks slowly, and my anxiety grew. What if they didn't finish their drinks? Would there be enough medication to achieve the desired effect? Then Brian leaned in and whispered something to Laura. She smiled and they quickly downed the rest of their drinks before heading out of the bar. Relief washed over me. I hurried to keep up, observing as Laura began to stumble and sway. Brian helped her by draping her arm around his neck and supporting her with his arm around her waist. By the time they reached his room, both were visibly unsteady. My timing was impeccable. At his door, Laura struggled to stay upright, and Brian fumbled with the keycard, making several attempts before finally getting it right and stumbling inside. I waited a few minutes to ensure they were settled before retrieving the keycard from Laura's purse and slipping into the room. Inside, Brian was mumbling, "What's wrong with you, baby? You didn't drink that much." His slurred speech signaled he was about to pass out. Laura was already face down on the bed, deeply asleep. Brian shook her, trying to rouse her. "Come on, baby, let's have some fun," he muttered before noticing me. "Hey, who are you?" he asked, struggling to stay upright. "Just her husband, you fool. Now be a good boy and pass out so I can take her away," I replied, watching him slowly collapse to the floor, unmoving. I approached the bed and noticed Brian's phone lying nearby. Curiosity got the better of me, and I picked it up to check its contents. I scrolled through numerous photos. Most were harmless, but then I found something more incriminating. There was a folder with various images of women, some in compromising positions. Among them were several photos of Laura, and others featuring women I recognized as teachers from her school and the wives of her colleagues. So, Brian has a taste for affairs with married women, I mused. This was going to be messy. I decided to share these photos with everyone in his contact list, especially the husbands of the women featured. When he returns home, he'll be in for a shock. I forwarded the photos and videos of Laura to her phone and then transferred them to mine as backup, my own little insurance policy. After powering down Brian's phone, I gathered all his belongings, clothes, toiletries, and other items, and packed them into his suitcase. I also searched his pockets, confiscating his cash, wallet, credit cards, driver's license, and passport. Without a passport, leaving the island would be a major hassle for him. Once the suitcase was packed, I turned to Laura, still lying on the bed with one leg hanging off. I carefully rolled her onto her back and then carried her to our room. I laid her on our bed and returned to Brian's room to collect the remaining items. I took his phone, wallet, and cash as compensation for his trouble. After thoroughly inspecting his room, I wanted to ensure he left with nothing. I even removed his shoes and found a hotel dumpster. I tossed his suitcase and shoes inside, covering them with trash to hide them. Returning to my room, I packed my own suitcase and Laura's belongings, treating her possessions with the same care as Brian's. I planned to leave her with nothing but the clothes on her back, her purse, necessary items like tampons, and her empty wallet with only the note I had left behind. As I finished up, I noticed it was already past 4 a.m. I needed to be at the airport by 9. Since Laura had finished her drink around 2, she wouldn't wake up until at least noon. I expected Brian to arrive around 10 in the morning, which meant I would be long gone before either of them woke. There was one last thing to do. I grabbed the 2 DVR discs I had recorded earlier and slipped a disc under each door of the rooms where the 2 women and their partners were staying. Stealthily, I made my way back to my room. Looking at Laura, who was sleeping peacefully, I was overwhelmed by a deep sense of loss. I had hoped to start a family with her, but she had other plans, and forgiveness was out of reach. After ensuring everything was packed, I took Laura's suitcase to the dumpster and added her belongings to the pile. Back in the room, I meticulously searched her purse to confirm it was empty of money, credit cards, or a passport. I wanted to make her return home as difficult as Brian's. Exhaustion hit me as I collapsed into a chair, but my mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead once I returned home. First, I planned to drain our bank and debit accounts and cancel all our credit cards. Next, I would gather my belongings and vacate our house. I knew I'd need a storage unit for my things, but that was a minor detail. I just wanted out of this house and this farce of a marriage. Exhaustion finally overtook me, and I fell asleep in the chair. When I awoke, it was nearly 7 in the morning. I rose and approached the bed, casting one last, sorrowful glance at Laura before carefully lifting her and carrying her out of the room. I set her down on a lounge chair by the pool. Since I was checking out, I didn't want her in the room when housekeeping arrived to clean and prepare it for the next guests. Returning to my room, I gathered my suitcases, double-checking to ensure I had everything. I still had Brian's phone, but an idea struck me. I went back to the pool, retrieved Laura's phone, and started sending the incriminating photos and videos to everyone in her contact list. I spared her young nieces and nephews, but her parents, siblings, and colleagues were all included. They'd find this information enlightening. At the front desk, I asked for a piece of tape, which I used to cover the contacts on Laura's phone battery, making it appear dead. I also made sure she didn't have a phone charging cord. Without money, it would take her a while to get the phone working. Just after 8 a.m., I heard commotion and shouting. It turned out to be the boyfriends of the women Brian had been with the previous day. They were now ex-boyfriends, judging by the chaos. One of them yelled, "You're a moron! Tell your family the wedding's off and I never want to see you again. Find your own way home, you cow." Another remained cold as his girlfriend pleaded, "Baby, please don't leave me. I'm so sorry. It was a stupid mistake, and you've already gotten your revenge. You're a traitor. Go to your new boyfriend. He might have more money, but he won't be as forgiving," he replied coldly, sending shivers down my spine. I wondered what fate awaited poor Brian. Well, I suppose I'd never know. Soon an ambulance arrived, and the hotel manager led the paramedics to Brian's room. I sincerely hoped he was all right. As onlookers gathered, I quietly hailed a taxi and headed to the airport. Upon switching on my phone, I noticed a voicemail. It was from my brother Tom. "Michael, what's going on? I've received a flood of photos and videos of Laura. I know she's attractive, but what's the deal? Fill me in when you get this." At the airport, while waiting to board my flight, I called Tom and explained everything. How Laura had been involved with Brian while we were away, and her attempts to conceive with him. Initially shocked, my brother thought I was joking. However, after urging him to review the video closely, he expressed his sympathies and offered assistance if needed. I thanked him and ended the call. I flew home alone, and upon landing, I powered up Brian's phone. It was inundated with voicemails and messages, many of which were threats directed at him. It seemed the photos and videos I distributed were not well received. After retrieving my luggage, I got my car from long-term parking and drove home, planning my next steps. Divorce was an option, but splitting our assets evenly didn't seem fair given Laura's infidelity. It felt unjust that she could cheat and still benefit from a divorce. As I drove, a new plan started to form in my mind, outlining what I needed and how to execute it. She had shattered our marriage, so I was determined to make her life as miserable as possible. Upon arriving home, I called my brother for help moving my belongings out of the house in the coming days, ensuring Laura would return to an empty home. I checked my phone again and found over 20 voicemails and a dozen messages, mostly from Laura's sister and other relatives, asking about her whereabouts and why she wasn't responding. I felt a twinge of relief that there were no messages from Laura herself. She probably hadn't realized what had happened yet, due to her phone being out of commission. I chuckled at the thought of her powering on her phone and being bombarded with inquiries about the photos and videos she unwittingly sent. She was in for quite a shock. My first priority was to cancel all our credit cards and transfer our money from our joint account to my personal one. Next, I began sorting through my clothes and personal items, discarding any gifts Laura had given me over the years, unless they were valuable. In that case, I sold them online or pawned them. Upon returning home, I turned off the home phone, directing all communication to my cell phone. It was around 11 p.m. when I finally checked my cell phone and found numerous texts and voicemails from Laura. It appeared she had managed to get her phone working again. Her initial messages were concerned and inquired about my whereabouts. But as she began to understand the situation, her tone shifted. Why? Why would you do this to me? Couldn't we have talked it out first? Laura's desperate messages filled my inbox. I chose to ignore them. Engaging further would only fuel her anguish. The following day was a whirlwind of activity. With no clear idea of when Laura would return, I had to act decisively. I bought boxes to pack our remaining belongings and rented a storage unit large enough to hold everything. I headed to the bank, drained our joint account, and transferred the funds into my business account, which I planned to close and disappear with. But there was one last thing to take care of. Our small starter home, once a symbol of our future, would now serve a different purpose. Drawing on my knowledge of construction, I planned extreme modifications to the house, ones that would leave a lasting impression. After gathering the necessary supplies from around the city, I was ready to start the renovations. That morning, my brother Tom arrived with his pickup truck. We spent the entire day moving my belongings to the storage unit, making several trips. By the evening, I was officially out of the house. I kept my plans for the house and Laura secret, knowing Tom would try to dissuade me if he knew the full extent of my intentions. When Tom asked about my next steps, I told him, "I'm leaving town and this dreadful marriage behind. I'm not going to file for divorce. When she gets back, I'll be gone. She can keep the house, but that's all she'll get from me." Tom looked worried. "You know this won't work. She'll hire a lawyer and track you down. Running away will only make things worse. You should get a lawyer, divorce her, and split the assets." "No," I said firmly. "She cheated and tried to pass another man's child off as mine. She deserves nothing, and that's exactly what she'll get. I'm not divorcing her. I'm going to leave her with nothing and make sure she's exposed for what she is." Tom knew better than to argue further. I'm stubborn, and once I've made up my mind, it's nearly impossible to change it. He left, advising me to think carefully and avoid rash actions. Since discovering Laura with her lover, I had been meticulously planning every detail. Now, it was time to set my plan into motion. That evening, I started working on the house, continuing late into the night. The anticipated snowstorm was a blessing. It was expected to shut down major airports, extending my time to complete the modifications. The heavy snowfall, adding up to 30 inches to the existing accumulation, worked to my advantage. Ignoring Laura's calls for the past 2 days, I finally decided to answer one to gather information. "Please, baby, listen. It was a mistake. A huge, foolish mistake. I never meant for things to escalate this way. I'll do whatever it takes. Just please forgive me," she begged, her voice trembling with emotion. Her pleas did nothing to change my resolve. I wanted nothing more to do with her, but I needed to keep up appearances. "Laura, you've hurt me deeply. I'm not sure if I can ever forgive you or trust you again. I need to understand why. Why did you do this to us? Didn't you love me? Wasn't I enough for you?" I kept my tone calm, though it was laced with sadness. Inside, I wanted to scream at her for being the heartless person she had become. I should have let her believe there was a chance for reconciliation. "Baby, please let me explain. None of it meant anything. He meant nothing to me. You mean everything to me. You're my life. You're everything. Please forgive me," she sobbed. After a brief pause, I replied, "I loved you, but you've shattered my heart. I don't know if we can fix this." "No, baby, we can fix everything. Our love will be stronger, our bond deeper. We just need to get through this. Please, can you wait until I come home so we can talk?" Her desperation was palpable. "I'm not sure. When will you be back?" "There's a complication. I don't have my passport or plane ticket. My sister is sending me some money since all my credit cards were stolen. By the way, can you call the credit card companies and cancel them for me?" Her transformation from pleading to commanding was striking. "All right, I'll handle it. Do you have any idea when you'll be back?" "I think in a few days. The American consulate here will issue me a new passport. Let me know when you leave." "Sure, I'll keep you posted." "Michael, Yes. I love you. See you when I'm back. I ended the call. This meant she wouldn't be back for several days, which was perfect. I had enough time to finish my plans and set things in motion for a new life without her. The next day, Tom called to check in and invited me over for dinner. I hadn't had a home-cooked meal in over a week, surviving on pizza and Chinese takeout, so I gladly accepted. After assuring Tom that I wouldn't do anything rash, I received another call from Laura. Hey, I just got word that I'll be getting my new passport in a couple of days. I just need to book a flight home, and I could be with you by evening if I catch an early flight. Will you meet me at the airport? I really want us to talk as soon as possible. I hesitated. Laura, I don't think that's a good idea. It would be better if you asked your sister to pick you up and take you home. We can talk once you're back. I was buying time. By the time she arrived, I'd be far away. Okay, baby, I love you, and I believe if you give me a chance, we can work through this. All right, Michael, I replied. We'll talk, and then we'll see. No promises. I lied to her just as she had deceived me. Knowing her return date gave me a clear timeline to wrap up my plans. First, I sold my work truck and bought a used one in good condition, registered under a friend's name. Next, I had to inform my employees that I was shutting down the business due to a personal crisis. It was unfortunate to leave so abruptly, but they deserved an explanation. Then, I reached out to an old college buddy now living in Colorado. After graduation, he had proposed a business venture, and he'd always promised steady work. He was shocked by my situation with Laura, recalling us as the perfect couple back then. He offered me a position as an assistant, noting the increased workload due to recent changes in marijuana laws. I requested an informal arrangement to keep Laura from tracking my movements or accessing my funds. With everything set, I was ready to leave. Laura's daily calls became a mix of declarations of love and pleas for forgiveness. She provided updates on her return and promised undying devotion upon her arrival. The day before she was due back, I loaded my new truck and emptied the house, leaving only Laura's belongings or items that held no value to me. I departed early the next morning, aiming to slip out of the city unnoticed. I asked my neighbor to record Laura's arrival as a favor, hinting at a surprise. He agreed enthusiastically, unaware of the true situation, and awaited my call. Everything was in place as I left the city, heading towards my new life in Colorado. It would take 2 days to reach my friend's place, and by then, Laura would already be home. Along the way, I felt a surprising sense of calm. The anger I had felt since witnessing Laura with Brian seemed to dissipate as I distanced myself from the turmoil. At noon, Laura called with distressing news. The house! It collapsed. It must have been the snow. I barely turned the key when I heard a loud crash and the roof caved in. Our house is gone, she cried. Well, Laura, don't worry. I'm sure your parents are still waiting for you, I replied cheerfully. As for me, I've taken some other measures. What do you mean? Our house is destroyed. How can you be so calm? Her anger was palpable. I couldn't help but smile. Our house didn't collapse from the snow. I made sure it did, just like you destroyed our marriage. What do you mean? She demanded. I explained with a hint of satisfaction. I rigged the house so it would collapse when you unlocked the door. I used temporary bracing and a chainsaw to weaken the structure. The front door was rigged to a winch I bought from a pawn shop. When you turned the key, the winch engaged, causing the collapse. Best of luck finding a new home, I said, before ending the call. I immediately called my neighbor. Michael, you won't believe this. Your house collapsed, apparently due to the snow, though there wasn't much accumulation. I've got it all on tape. Your wife was trying to open the door when it happened. She's okay, though. I asked him to email me the video. Satisfied, I powered off my phone and continued my journey toward a fresh start. It's been nearly 3 years since then, and I've established a comfortable life in Colorado. I stay in touch with a few friends back in Minnesota, but avoid direct contact with family, knowing they might reveal my whereabouts to Laura. It seems Laura got what she wanted. She's pregnant with Brian's child. Initially, she claimed the baby was mine and painted me as a neglectful father who abandoned her. Even my own mother was convinced by her story and was eager for a grandchild. To clear my name, I enlisted a friend to contact my brother for a DNA test, comparing the baby's DNA with my brother's. If the baby was mine, there would be a match. If not, there would be no resemblance. Astonishingly, Laura agreed to the test. When the results came back, My mother expelled Laura from the house and denounced her and the child. As for Brian, he suffered severe injuries inflicted by two men at the resort and spent over a week in the hospital. Upon returning home, he was confronted by several other ex-husbands. Rumor has it that he's now in hiding and may be impotent, putting an end to his days of promiscuity.